Hello everyone and welcome to another video with me, 320 Sim Pilot, and today we're looking at another addition to the fly-by-wire A32NX mod in Microsoft Flight Simulator. The electrical system has come to life. It's now available on the ECAM status page, so we're going to have a look through it and see what's going on with the electrical system in the Airbus as we fly around and some of the typical things you'd expect to see in sort of day-to-day operations. We're using the latest custom fly-by-wire and autopilot system version, although I believe this electrical system should be in the dev mode as well. We are on the ground here in Newcastle using Orbex's Newcastle, so thank you to Orbex for providing the scenery. And we are going to jump into the flight deck, power on the airplane and have a look at what's changed over the old system. We're also going to be looking at some ToLiss A321 action because there are some failures that we can simulate with that. Before we get started, there we go, look, one of our Manta upcoming liveries, 1980s livery, not yet shown on the channel, but soon to be used. Just happened to be loaded in. I haven't seen that before, but there it is. Right, let's jump into the video. Here we are on the flight deck, and the plane is completely powered down, which is important for what we are about to do. The first thing you'll notice is on the overhead panel, up here, the battery indicators are displayed. They would be already the liquid crystal displays, and they just sit there and show you the voltage of the batteries on the aircraft. They're quite big batteries, but there they are. So 28 volts on both sides. Previously this was always locked to 24.5, which wasn't right. We have to have a battery voltage of 25.5. It's something we check whenever we power on the aeroplane. So once we arrive at the flight deck as we are now, we will check, obviously, the engine masters are off, the mode selector is in norm, and then make sure the weather radar's off, the wiper selectors are off, landing levers down, and then pretty quickly we go to our battery setup. So before we power them on, we check they're at the right voltage. We need to check that they are above 25.5 volts, and as I said previously, they were always too low, but luckily now they're correct at 28.0, so we can power them on. We're going to go for battery number 1, then battery number 2, and the system starts to come to life. Now, this is an airplane running on batteries. So what you'll notice is some things are there and some things aren't, because an airplane on batteries is not a happy thing. It does not want to sit on batteries for long. It is just, it is a real backup thing. So what we want to do is get that ground power on and get ourselves warmed up. So while the airplane warms up, let's have a quick chat about the electrical systems. If we go to the overhead panel, we can see on our electrical panel a pretty simplified version of what the Airbus's system looks like, and it is very simplified. The electrical generators here are driven by the IDGs, integrated drive generators. So these are red and guarded switches, which is because we don't want to press them. You can't disconnect them, and this is what this button would do, it would disconnect it. You can't disconnect them unless the engine is turning anyway, but also if you press that in flight, you cannot reconnect it, which means you cannot get this generator back. But there we go, we have a generator on each engine, which powers a bus bar on each side. We also have our batteries up here, and we have the essential bus system if we need it. Over here we have the external power input and the APU generator input. We leave this on nearly all the time, but more to come on that later. So we have two generators on the aircraft. Both of them here produce AC power, electrical power. We've got two versions. You've got AC, alternating current, and DC, direct current. They both supply AC power to the AC bus bars, which is fed into the essential, so there's a few AC bus bars. And then you've got the DC bus bars powered by the same thing, but the AC has to be converted to DC by a transformer rectifier unit. Don't worry, this won't be important for us. So what has been added by the fly-by-wire team this time? Well, of course, we saw the voltage is now showing a much more healthy figure up on the overhead panel. Let's now look down at our systems and see what we're talking about. So we can go down to here and on the ECAM press elect, and there is now a more accurate electrical page, and this shows us what we saw on the overhead panel. So there are AC bus bars, and when I say a bus bar, this is pretty much like a plug socket extension. So you know you have one plug socket at home, you can plug in one of those adapters and have sort of four plugs. That's sort of what the AC bus bars do. My understanding of it is limited. I'm not an engineer, so I apologize to those of you, especially electrical engineers out there, who will know far more about this than I do. But aircraft systems are plugged into these bus bars. So each of these bus bars will power specific things, and they will be divided across the bus bars to make sure that we always have them available if we need them, even with a failure of, for example, a bus bar, something like that. So at the moment, I can see my external power at 115 volts, 400 hertz, which is what the AC system runs on, is plugged in and powering both of those bus bars. What we can also see is through the AC1 and bus bar, it powers the AC Essential bus bar. Likewise, we can see that AC2 and AC1 are powering transformer rectifier units and converting that AC power into DC to provide DC power. Through that, we can also obviously charge up the batteries if we need to. If the voltage drops, they will charge. They're pretty automatic on their own. Once they're turned on, they can charge. So we don't actually involve ourselves with the batteries too much. So this has all been modeled correctly now. So the generators are both offline. The only reason for that is they are both on, as you can see up here, but you see the fault light because the aircraft has not got the engines running, so they won't be powered. So that is pretty normal. So the next thing we'd expect to do is swap over to the APU generator. So I'm going to start up the APU down there, and pretty soon we will have that ready for us and we can use that. Important to note, the APU generator switch up here is always on. You never bother to turn it off. It's only used for specific reasons to turn it off. It's always on. It's left on the airplane. It's a switch that most pilots, if you said to them, without being in the flight deck, where's the APU generator switch, they wouldn't really be able to picture it because we just never use it. It's just left off. Right, our generator is available because the APU is avail, and that's what this avail light really is telling us. So on the overhead panel, you can see it says APU, master switch is on, starter says avail, so the APU is running. So what I can do now is simply get rid of the ground power. So let's look at our electrical page. Here we go. We can see the APU gen sitting there. It's got no load on it, but it is running at 115 volts, 400 hertz. If I go to the APU page, I can see the generator there. It's not doing anything. The load is at 0, but it is there. Let's go back onto the overhead panel. Let's simply turn external power off. It says avail, but we're no longer using it. And now if we look at our systems, we can see the APU gen is working and the external power is just sitting there. Now the load number isn't working at the moment. That seems to be stuck at 0, but there it is. So that has now swapped over, and now we can see APU is supplying both those bus bars. Right, it's time well, that's pretty much the configuration we'd be in for pushback. So APU generator, we're going to use that APU obviously to start the engine shortly. So let's get the engines up and running and see what happens to the electrical system. And there we go, pushing back from stand. Let's go and get those engines started, and we can go and see what is going on with the electrical system in a powered up aeroplane. Right, let's get the engine started up. I'm not going to look at the correct start procedure. We're going to focus on what's going on with the electrical system. But there we go. So we'll start the timer, mode switch to ignition, start engine 2. If we look down in here, there's our pressure, and we'll see N2 spinning, the EGT. If we go to the electrical page, you'll notice generator's offline. Now, at some points in the past, I don't know if any airlines do it these days, you might count the engine as started when that generator light went out. So in the aircraft, when starting the engine, you'll get a big clunk when there is a power changeover. I'm not sure why the flaps are doing that. So we shall see if we get that today. It's a bit of a clunk. You hear it. You hear the power changeover. So that's Gen 2 over there, which I'll expect to come to life very shortly. It happens quite late in the start cycle, obviously, because the generators need a fairly smoothly running engine before they can come online. There it is, light's gone out. So in real life, you get a bit of a clunk. You know that the generator has come online. It's quite satisfying. It's a bit similar to the one when you power up the aeroplane, but it's just a changeover. Same, I suppose it's more like when you change from ground power to the APU. So yeah, it'd be nice if that gets added one day. But now, if we look down on the systems page, no surprise, generator 2 is supplying this side of the system, and the APU gen is still supplying side number 1. This becomes important if you have an engine failure, because you'd start up the APU and use that to supply that side. It's better to have, obviously, 2 generators. So we're going to start engine 1 and we'll be in a similar situation. Whilst engine 1 is starting, you'll notice the IDG, very hot. These are very hot. They use, obviously, a lot of oil inside there. So what happens is the oil is transferred or used in a heat exchanger. So this oil is used to warm up fuel, and the fuel cools down the oil. So a nice sort of balance, the best of both worlds. You cool down your oil, heat up your fuel, because after a long flight, you want that fuel to be a bit warmer. That fuel then gets put into the outer fuel tanks, which then flows over constantly into the inner tank. So these outer tanks tend to sit warmer than the inner tanks because the IDG heated fuel is being put into those. Tiny bit of trivia there for you. So shortly we'll have both generators up and running. There we go, that's a normal sort of picture to be looking at. So both those generators taking over their sides of the system. AC1 by default will power the AC Essential bus bar. The DC Essential powered through DC, and the batteries are up there. Number 2 system on its own. These percentages should show some load. They're not typically even because of course one side has more powered by it. But yeah, there we go, that's what we're looking at for now. If we go to the overhead panel, we can turn off that APU now, and magically that APU just disappears offline. So there we go, that is the typical electrical configuration of the Airbus as we taxi out. Just as we take off, I'd like to highlight my new website, www.320simpilot.com, where you will find collections of the tutorials put into a neater order for you. So if you're just starting out, they'll provide you with a flow all the way through as you learn the Airbus from the beginnings. Also features my reviews. It'll be updated with the latest reviews and previews coming soon, links to the store and other information about the channel. So it's the one-stop shop for all things 320 Sim Pilot. So here we are in flight now, climbing up to sort of a stopping flight level of 160 for now. Let's have a look at that electrical system again and see what happens if we shut down an engine. So I'm now going to pretend we've had a failure of engine number 1, and what we should see is generator 2 immediately pick up the load. So there goes engine 1, turning it off. We get our ECAMs, but we'll ignore that for now. Let's see what happens on here. That generator in real life would go offline. There it goes. And generator 2 now supplies the number 1 side. Obviously, if it was the other way around, generator 1 would supply the number 2 side. You'll notice it says galley shed. This is because one generator is not able to supply both electrical systems and the galley. So this just loses some sort of entertainment style things in the cabin, maybe the kettles or the ovens if you have those fitted on your aeroplane. So that's what that's saying there. So you might get a call from the cabin shortly after losing a generator to ask about it. Now, it is possible to dispatch with one generator inoperative, but the way we do that is we have to run the APU, and this could be an option now if you had a generator fail in flight. Now we're relying on that one generator. It might be nice to have a backup just in case, because we've seen that one has failed. So what I'm going to do is on the overhead panel, we'll just start up that APU. If you're up in the cruise, this might not be an option, but for us here, this will be an option. Get it up and running. Okay, that APU is now available, so let us jump into the systems page, and there it is running the left-hand side of the system. So that's a far nicer situation to be in. This is what we like to see. You'll notice these other numbers here, emergency generator and essential transformer and rectifier. So what is going on there? Well, we have all of our systems supplied by these bus bars, but there's some that are really important, and they're supplied by the AC Essential or the DC Essential bus bars. These need to always be powered, and they're the last things that we'll be running even if we lose both generators. This happens through the ram air turbine. If we lost both generators and the APU generator, we would find that the ram air turbine, a little propeller that comes out underneath the aeroplane, and I'll just zoom around here to show you. It comes out on this side. I think it's actually modelled. Yeah, that little door there would come out. There's a propeller that spins. The spinning propeller powers the blue hydraulic system, which will then be used to run an electrical generator. That generator is then going to power the DC Essential bus bar via the Essential Transformer Rectifier and the AC Essential bus bar, and that's all you'll get. So you'll get a little box here, a little square. I'm curious to see if that's modelled yet. I wouldn't expect it to be. We're going to jump into X-Plane in a second to try it out. So I'm going to turn off both generators and see what happens. So the generators are off. Of course, I've got the APU running. Let's turn off the APU generator. There it goes. So now we have no electrical power. The ram air turbine would drop. There's a few seconds now where the system and the essential buses will be powered by the batteries, but that is a limited amount of time. And then in theory, the ram air turbine would deploy and we would see it, but I'm not sure it will. It's automatic in the aircraft if you lose all electrical power like this. But it looks to me like it might not be there. It's certainly not modelled on the outside. Not many simulators do have that. Okay, so here we are now in X-Plane 11, and we are going to take a look using the ToLiss A321 Neo to have a look at some of the complex failures that we could see. Just a brief overview. I have done a video specifically on the dual generator failure or the emergency electrical config failure, but let's go and take a look at some of the the other failures that we could see. So what I'm going to show you now, just as we climb away here, is something that's a little bit of trivia. The AC Essential bus bar is what's going to be used to supply a few important things, such as the captain's PFD navigation display and the top engine display. So it's really important it's powered. As you can see, it's powered via AC bus bar 1. So what happens if we have a failure of the AC1 bus bar? So I can show you that, and this used to be a bigger failure than it is now. So let's add a fault. Let's see if we can do an electrical fault of AC bus bar 1, and we'll do it now. So here we go. So let's do apply now, and there you go. AC bus bar 1 has gone offline, and we lose the screens on the captain's side. The autopilot's disconnected, and as I've shown in my previous video, you would do your normal failure management situation here. But it's quite an important distinction. If we go to the electrical page, which we can't really do unless you can see it actually in the real aircraft. It's possible to bring it up, but at the moment we can't. But what it does say is AC Essential Feed Alternate. So what we're going to do is press this button up here. Now on modern Airbuses, this is automatic. They've been modified because look at this. It's quite a serious failure when it's in reality just one bus bar that's failed. So it shouldn't be quite so severe. So these days this happens automatically. We do AC Essential Feed. So instead of supplying it from AC bus 1, we can now do it from bus bar 2, and it says alternate, and that brings everything back. Look, suddenly we're in a much more normal situation. We even go back into alternate law, so we can get back control of the auto thrust, of the autopilot, and all of that stuff. So the magic is these days automatically the airplane would swap over, and now AC Essential is being supplied by the AC2. So that's just a little bit of trivia of one of the faults that used to be more severe than it is these days. You'll notice as well the DC Essential bus bar now has to be supplied from the AC Essential via the Transformer Rectifier Essential. So this is where the ToLiss is really excellent. It has so many of these systems simulated properly. So let's go back into the ToLiss. Let's reset those. It says auto thrust off, but we know it's on. Okay. Let's go back to our electrical page. So what I promised you now was what happens if we lose both AC bus bar 1 and 2. So I can show you that by simply turning off both generators. So there's generator 1, and we see generator 2 take up the slack, and the galley shed happens. Now we're going to lose generator 2. There we go. We're now in emergency electrical config. A very nasty situation indeed, as I've shown in previous videos. Now, the only way to see the ECAM is you have to hold the button down and it will appear up here. But look, here is our emergency electrical configuration. So we've lost all of this side. We've lost the AC1, but we've got the AC Essential and the DC Essentials being supplied by the emergency generator. That has deployed automatically. That is the ram air turbine. It's not modeled on the exterior of the ToLiss either. I'd like to see it one day. It would be nice, but for now it's not there. I don't know if it will be added, but there we go. So that is now running, providing us with AC power to the AC Essential, which provides power to these screens. It provides VHF1. It supplies our FMGC here, but obviously we've lost a lot of things. Then on the DC side, it goes through the transformer rectifier and supplies that. And there you go. So the airplane is incredibly capable. We've got lots of different ways, and if we're lucky, let's say, for example, it was just a generator problem, we might be able to bring the APU online and get some of the power back. Something else to note is, as part of fixing this problem, as I showed in my video, you can disconnect the two sides of the bus tie. So you turn the bus tie off, and that will then enable you to try and reset the generators or the bus bars just in case. But there we go. Something to note whilst we are talking about this configuration is that let's try and get some of these pages out of the way. Again, this is not how you'd handle a failure in real life. It is just me showing you guys. Something to note is that the ram air turbine relies on airflow. So as you're rolling out on the runway, the airflow gets so low that the ram air turbine will stop spinning and you'll lose that electrical power, and the airplane will swap to batteries only. It also runs on batteries for just a few seconds whilst you're transferring onto the ram air turbine, because the ram air turbine has to actually deploy underneath. So yeah, that's what would happen. Now look, we've got things back because that AP generator is online and it's coupled. Whether that would work in real life, I don't know, but there you go. We now have a generator powering the system, so the airplane goes back into, as we had before, a much better state. So there you go, a bit of a more detailed look at some of the deeper electrical system modelling that we get from the more mature ToLiss A321 that's been around longer, and it has a fantastic failure system built into it where we get to see these failures. That's all for today's video. Thank you very much for watching. I hope it's been of interest to you. As ever, this is amazing work by the fly-by-wire team, and that's the only reason we're getting such a fantastic simulation in Microsoft Flight Simulator of the A320. So all credit to them for the amazing work they're doing. I hope you've learned something from it that will hopefully give you a bit of extra use in your home simulations, but obviously not for any real-world use. There'll be more live streams and videos coming on the channel soon, including some exciting previews of upcoming aircraft, so do please stay tuned for that and subscribe if you'd like to see more of this style of content. Otherwise, do please keep safe and well. We'll see you again in another video or live stream soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.